That's mine. I'm going to stick with that.
And that's what you're going to settle for.
I'm going to stick.
Tonight at 5, we are getting new details about the 2 people who were killed in a Thanksgiving Day shooting on the east side of Indianapolis.
As close friends and family tell our Ashton Hackman, the shooting was shocking for all who knew them.
Corkney Morgan Jr. was the kind of guy who could light up any room. A close friend says everyone knew him as CJ. This is him with his girlfriend, Meghan Wiekerson. Both were just 36. Friends and family tell 13 News the couple were shot inside their Audubon Road home on Thanksgiving morning. Firefighters responding to a house fire were the ones to find them. CJ died at the scene. Meghan died later at the hospital. One of their close friends, still trying to process all of this, didn't want to go on camera, but she told me CJ and Meghan had been together for 5 years and had known each other since they were kids. The two had young children, just 1 and 3 years old. Both were home during the shooting, and thankfully both made it out alive. IMPD hasn't named a suspect yet, but investigators tell us they're working with Whitestown police to see whether a man arrested after a chase on I-65 shortly after the homicide might be connected. And as Audubon Road quiets down after a tragic scene on Thanksgiving, loved ones say CJ and Meghan deserve answers and justice. Metro Police are still piecing together the double homicide investigation as fire officials are working to confirm the fire investigation. Obviously, anybody with any information are asked to give IMPD or IFD a call. On the east side of Indianapolis, I'm Ashton Hackman, 13 News.
On Thanksgiving Day, November 27, 2025, at approximately 10:17 a.m., emergency crews responded to a residential fire at a home on North Audubon Road, near 38th Street, on Indianapolis east side. Inside, Indianapolis police discovered 36-year-old Corkney, CJ Morgan Jr., and 36-year-old Meghan Wiekerson, both suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Morgan was pronounced dead at the scene. Wiekerson was transported to a local hospital in critical condition and later succumbed to her injuries. Firefighters also found the couple's 2 young children, a 3-year-old nonverbal son and 1-year-old daughter, alive and unharmed. Authorities later linked the incident to an 18-year-old suspect who was charged with murder and alleged to have set the house on fire after the shooting, triggering a high-speed pursuit on I-65 before crashing near Lafayette. The complex interplay of violence, arson, and unanswered motive remains under investigation. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. By the time formal charges were filed, investigators had established that Jaron Morgan, age 18, was the primary suspect in the deaths of his father, Corkney CJ Morgan Jr., and his father's partner, Meghan Wiekerson, both 36 years old. The incident occurred inside a residence on North Audubon Road on Indianapolis east side on Thanksgiving Day, November 27, 2025. Following the deaths, Jaron Morgan fled the scene in a vehicle. Law enforcement later located the vehicle traveling northbound on Interstate 65. A pursuit ensued and ended near Lafayette, Indiana, where the vehicle crashed and Jaron Morgan was taken into custody. He was detained without release pending court proceedings. At the charging stage, prosecutors filed murder charges related to the deaths of both victims, along with arson-related charges tied to the fire set inside the residence. Authorities indicated that additional charges could be considered depending on the outcome of pending forensic analysis.
In the courtroom today, an 18-year-old accused of killing his father and his father's girlfriend appeared before a judge for the first time.
Police say that Jaron Morgan killed the couple on Thanksgiving morning, and then went to set the house on fire. Those are the allegations. Our Ashton Hackman in the courtroom today explaining what comes up next in this very heartbreaking case.
18-year-old Jaron Morgan had to be wheeled into the courtroom for his initial hearing Tuesday morning. He's still recovering from a crash during a police chase shortly after the homicides. Both his hands were cuffed to the wheelchair as he listened to the judge read him his charges: murder, armed robbery, and felony arson. The shooting happened just after 10 Thanksgiving morning inside this home on Audubon Road. Firefighters called to put out a fire found Corkney CJ Morgan and his girlfriend Meghan Wiekerson. Both were shot. CJ died inside the home. Meghan died at the hospital. Police say Jaron shot the couple in front of their 2 young children before stealing Wiekerson's Dodge Charger and speeding off. Court documents reveal shortly after police in Boone County saw the Charger speeding on 65 and chased after it towards Lafayette. It ended in a crash and Morgan was hospitalized. He wasn't officially charged until a week later. Morgan told detectives he couldn't remember the shooting or the police chase. He is figuring out if he will hire an attorney or have one provided by the state. His next court date is set for January 6th.
As with all murder cases in Indiana, Jaron Morgan will be held here in custody at the Marion County Jail until his case reaches a conclusion. In the meantime, his jury trial is set for February 23rd. In Indianapolis, Ashton Hackman, 13 News.
Investigators confirmed that both Meghan Wiekerson and Corkney Morgan Jr. sustained fatal gunshot wounds before the fire was set. Autopsy findings supported this determination. Fire investigators concluded the fire was not accidental and was intentionally ignited after the shootings occurred. Because the fire was used after the killings and contributed to the destruction of the scene, the case met the legal definition of homicide with arson elements. Evidence already secured at that point included ballistic material recovered from the residence, gunshot residue indicators, fire debris samples showing deliberate ignition, vehicle data from the suspect's flight, and preliminary surveillance footage tracking movement away from home. Evidence still pending included full digital extractions from mobile devices, additional laboratory testing of fire debris, and final ballistic comparisons. The residence on the 3700 block of North Audubon Road was a single-family home located in a residential neighborhood composed largely of similar properties occupied by families. The area was not identified by police as a high-crime location prior to the incident. Corkney, CJ Morgan Jr., and Meghan Wiekerson lived in the home with their 2 young children. The residence functioned as their primary household, not a temporary or secondary location. Records and interviews confirm the family had been living there for a sustained period. Daily routines at the residence were centered around childcare. With a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old in the home, the household followed a structured pattern involving feeding, supervision, and routine care. Thanksgiving Day activity appeared consistent with normal occupancy, and there was no evidence indicating the adults were preparing to leave the home or expecting visitors at the time. Law enforcement reviewed prior calls for service associated with the address. No pattern of repeated emergency responses, domestic disturbance calls, or reported violence at the location was disclosed prior to the incident. Investigators examined known visitors and individuals with access to the residence. Family members and close associates were identified as the most frequent contacts. This analysis became relevant as the suspect was familiar with the home and its occupants and did not require forced entry. Meghan Wiekerson was 36 years old at the time of her death. She was a resident of Indianapolis and lived full-time at the North Audubon Road home. Her background did not indicate any active criminal history or ongoing legal disputes. Her daily responsibilities were primarily related to parenting and household management. Records and digital activity showed she was actively involved in caring for her children and maintaining daily routines inside the home. As a parent, Wiekerson shared responsibility for the children's care and supervision. She coordinated daily schedules and remained present in the household throughout the morning of Thanksgiving Day. Investigators reviewed communications from the weeks leading up to the incident. Phone and messaging records confirmed she had been in contact with family members and acquaintances shortly before the shooting occurred. One communication took place within minutes of the incident, allowing investigators to narrow the time frame in which the violence began. Her last confirmed movements placed her inside the residence. Location data from her personal devices showed no departure from the home in the period immediately preceding the incident. Corkney C.J. Morgan Jr. was also 36 years old. He resided at the North Audubon Road home and shared parenting responsibilities with Meghan Wiekerson. Public records describe him as having long-standing family connections in the Indianapolis area. Investigators examined household dynamics by reviewing communications, interviewing relatives, and assessing recent interactions. There was no publicly identified evidence of an active dispute between Morgan and Wiekerson prior to the incident. Morgan played a direct role in parenting the children and was present in the home at the time of the shooting. Digital timestamps and witness accounts confirmed his presence inside the residence that morning. Financial and legal reviews did not reveal active civil cases, criminal warrants, or significant financial distress linked to Morgan at the time of his death. His last known activities involved routine household behavior within the residence. There was no evidence he attempted to flee or leave the home before the shooting occurred. The two children present during the incident were a 3-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter. First responders located both children alive during the emergency response after the fire was extinguished. The children were found in areas of the home separate from where Meghan Wiekerson and Corkney Morgan Jr. were located. Their positioning limited direct exposure to the shooting and fire. Medical evaluations conducted immediately after rescue confirmed that neither child sustained gunshot injuries, burn injuries, or significant smoke inhalation. Both were cleared by medical personnel following observation. Child Protective Services were notified as part of standard protocol. The children were placed under protective supervision, while custody determinations were addressed through the appropriate legal process. Due to their ages, neither child was capable of providing verbal testimony or formal statements. As a result, investigators relied entirely on physical evidence, forensic analysis, digital records, and adult witness statements to reconstruct the events that occurred inside the home. When first responders arrived at a residence on North Audubon Road, the most visible element of the scene was fire damage. Flames had already caused significant destruction by the time fire crews gained control of the structure. However, early observations by firefighters and investigators suggested that the fire was not the initiating event. Instead, it appeared to be a secondary act that occurred after a violent incident had already taken place inside the home. Fire origin analysis focused on identifying where the fire began and how it spread. Investigators determined that the fire did not originate from common accidental sources, such as electrical wiring, kitchen appliances, or heating systems. The point of origin was located away from these typical ignition sources, indicating intentional placement rather than mechanical failure. The areas of greatest burn damage were concentrated in specific sections of the residence rather than uniformly distributed. Certain rooms showed accelerated burn patterns, while adjacent areas were less affected. This uneven distribution suggested that the fire had been deliberately started in target locations rather than spreading naturally from a single accidental source. Several indicators supported the conclusion that the fire was secondary. Fire investigators noted that structural elements showed heat exposure that occurred after other forms of damage were already present. Additionally, the condition of items within the home indicated that the fire began after occupants were no longer moving through the space, reinforcing the assessment that the fire followed another event rather than preceded it. Accelerant testing was conducted on debris collected from a suspected point of origin. Laboratory analysis identified substances consistent with ignitable liquids. These findings ruled out accidental causes and further supported the conclusion that the fire was intentionally set. Based on burn patterns, origin analysis, and accelerant results, arson investigators formally classified the fire as intentional, shifting the case from a fire investigation to a homicide with arson components. As the fire investigation progressed, evidence of gunfire became central to the case. Inside the residence, investigators documented multiple gunshot wounds on both adult victims. The number of wounds, along with their placement, indicated that the shootings were deliberate and targeted rather than accidental. Medical examiner findings confirmed that both victims suffered fatal gunshot injuries. Examination revealed that the wounds were inflicted prior to exposure to fire. This determination was based on the absence of soot inhalation and burn-related trauma that would suggest the victims were alive during the fire. The medical findings established that death occurred before the fire was set. Ballistic evidence was recovered from within the residence. Investigators located spent shell casings and bullet fragments consistent with a single firearm, The location of this evidence helped establish where shots were fired and the positions of the victims at the time of the shootings. Ballistic markings were preserved for comparison with any recovered weapon. Determining whether the shots occurred before the fire was a critical component of the investigation. Medical evidence, combined with fire damage analysis, confirmed that gunfire preceded ignition. This sequence established that the fire was not an accidental result of the shooting, but a separate act carried out afterward. The implications for timeline reconstruction were significant. By establishing that the shootings occurred first, investigators were able to narrow the window in which the suspect remained inside the home after the victims were incapacitated. This sequencing also supported the theory that the fire was intended to destroy evidence or delay discovery rather than being a coincidental outcome. Emergency response records show that the first 911 calls were received shortly after the fire became visible. The initial calls reported a residential fire, not a shooting. Callers contacted authorities from outside the residence, and no reports indicated knowledge of gunshot victims at the time of the initial dispatch. Timestamps from dispatch logs established a clear sequence of calls and responses. Fire units were prioritized due to the reported presence of smoke and flames. Law enforcement was notified simultaneously due to the potential for occupants being inside the home. Information provided during the initial calls focused on visible fire conditions rather than violence. This differed from what responders later discovered upon entering the residence. Once firefighters located the victims and observed gunshot wounds, the response escalated to include homicide investigators. Dispatch prioritization decisions were based on the information available at the time. Fire suppression and rescue were treated as immediate concerns. Law enforcement response expanded once the scene was recognized as a crime scene rather than solely a fire emergency. Review of response logs identified no significant delays in dispatch. However, investigators noted the inherent limitations of responding to a fire call when the underlying incident involved homicide. The lack of early information about gunfire shaped the initial approach and delayed the preservation of certain areas as a crime scene until the fire was extinguished. Investigators identified an 18-year-old male suspect in connection with the case. Court documents confirmed a direct familial relationship between the suspect and one of the victims. This connection immediately elevated the suspect's relevance to the investigation. Records showed that the suspect had prior contact with the residents. This included previous visits and a known association with the household. Investigators did not treat the suspect as a random intruder, but rather as someone familiar with the home's layout and occupants. A review of prior law enforcement interactions revealed previous encounters involving the suspect, though not all were criminal in nature. These interactions provided context, but were not the sole basis for identifying the suspect as responsible. Behavioral indicators cited in charging documents included actions following the incident rather than statements made at the scene. Investigators emphasized post-incident behavior, movement patterns, and attempts to leave the area as factors supporting probable cause. Law enforcement focused on this individual early due to the combination of relational proximity, access to the residence, and evidence indicating a rapid departure following the incident. These factors narrowed the suspect pool quickly and directed investigative resources toward tracking his movements. Shortly after the incident, investigators began tracking a vehicle believed to be associated with the suspect. The vehicle matched descriptions obtained through investigative methods and was later located traveling northbound on Interstate 65. The timeline between the incident and pursuit indicated a brief window in which the suspect left the scene. This supported the theory that the suspect departed shortly after setting the fire. Law enforcement initiated a pursuit on Interstate 65. The chase covered multiple miles and involved elevated speeds. Authorities coordinated across jurisdictions to manage the pursuit safely. The pursuit ended when the suspect's vehicle crashed near Lafayette. The suspect was taken into custody at the scene of the crash. No additional injuries were reported at the time of arrest. Evidence recovered from the vehicle included items relevant to the investigation. These items were collected, documented, and submitted for forensic analysis. The recovery of this evidence further connected the suspect to the events at the residence and supported the charges filed. As the physical crime scene was processed, investigators shifted focus to digital and communication evidence to establish a precise timeline and identify actions taken before and after shooting. Phone records became a central component. Law enforcement obtained call detail records for devices associated with Meghan Wiekerson, Corkney, C.J. Morgan Jr., and the suspect. These records documented outgoing and incoming calls, timestamps, and call durations in the hours leading up to the incident. Investigators confirmed that Wiekerson made at least one outgoing phone call shortly before gunfire was reported. The recipient of that call was identified and later interviewed. While the content of the call was not publicly released, authorities confirmed it occurred minutes before the fatal sequence, placing Wiekerson alive and conscious shortly before the shootings. No completed outgoing calls were confirmed from Morgan Jr. during that same window. Text messages and application-based communications were also seized under warrant. This included SMS messages, social media messaging platforms, and any third-party applications capable of voice or video calls. At the time of charging, prosecutors indicated that portions of this data were still undergoing forensic extraction. Some messages were recovered, while others were deleted or encrypted, requiring additional analysis. Officials have not confirmed whether any explicit threats, arguments, or planning communications were found. Location data played a significant role in corroborating movement. Cell tower pings and GPS records placed the suspect device at or near the residence during the estimated time of the shootings. Subsequent location data showed rapid movement away from the area, aligning with the timeline of the reported fire and later pursuit. This data supported the assertion that the suspect left the scene shortly after the incident. Surveillance footage from nearby homes, traffic cameras, and commercial properties along the suspected route was reviewed. Cameras near the residence provided partial exterior coverage, confirming vehicle movement consistent with the suspect departure. Traffic cameras along Interstate 65 further documented the vehicle's travel path. However, no publicly released footage captured the interior of the home or the shootings themselves. Authorities have distinguished between data that confirms known movements and data that remains unverified. Confirmed evidence includes call timestamps, device location pings, and traffic camera captures. Unverified elements include the full content of deleted messages, the precise sequence of actions inside the home, and whether additional devices were involved. Prosecutors have outlined a basic theory of the case without offering a detailed public motive. Their filings indicate that the suspect had a direct familial connection to one of the victims and access to the residence. This relationship established opportunity and proximity but did not, on its own, define intent. What has not been officially established is a specific triggering event. Authorities have not publicly identified a single argument, dispute, or incident that immediately preceded the shootings. While investigators reviewed prior interactions between the suspect and the victims, no formal motive statement has been entered into the public record at this stage. Conflicts or disputes leading up to the incident remain largely undefined. Prosecutors have acknowledged reviewing family dynamics, prior disagreements, and possible stressors, but have not confirmed whether these factors played a direct role. No protective orders or active domestic violence cases connected to the household were publicly disclosed at the time charges were filed. The absence of a public motive explanation has led to speculation, but legally, motive is not required for conviction. Prosecutors are required to prove actions, intent, and causation, not the emotional or psychological reasons behind them. If evidence establishes that the suspect knowingly caused the deaths and then attempted to destroy evidence through arson, a conviction can proceed without a clearly articulated motive. The suspect made an initial court appearance within days of arrest. During this hearing, formal charges were presented, including multiple counts of murder and an arson-related offense. Prosecutors cited the use of a firearm and the presence of children in the home as aggravating factors, though not all enhancements have been finalized. Bond was denied due to the severity of the charges and the alleged flight from the scene. The court determined that the suspect posed a risk of non-appearance and a potential danger to the public. The suspect was ordered held without bail pending further proceedings. A preliminary hearing was scheduled to address probable cause and evidentiary issues. Prosecutors indicated that additional forensic results, including digital evidence and fire investigation reports, would be submitted prior to trial. Defense counsel reserved the right to challenge the admissibility of certain evidence, including location data and surveillance footage. The projected timeline includes pretrial motions, evidentiary hearings, and possible competency evaluations if requested. A trial date has not yet been finalized, and prosecutors have stated that the complexity of the evidence may extend pretrial proceedings. Possible additional charges remain under review. These may include further arson enhancements or charges related to endangerment of minors, depending on final forensic conclusions. Several key questions remain unresolved. One of the most significant is why the fire was set after shootings. Investigators believe the fire occurred after victims were shot, but whether it was intended to destroy evidence, delay discovery, or serve another purpose has not been conclusively established. Another unresolved issue is whether the timeline supports premeditation. While the suspect's actions after the incident suggest awareness and decision-making, prosecutors have not yet stated whether they will argue premeditation or rely on other legal theories. The final minutes inside the home remain unclear. Investigators cannot yet reconstruct the exact sequence of movements, conversations, or actions that occurred immediately before the shootings. The absence of interior surveillance and limited witness testimony complicates this reconstruction. The fact that the children were unharmed has raised additional questions. Authorities have not stated whether they were asleep, in a separate room, or otherwise shielded from the events. This detail remains part of an ongoing review. Evidence still under forensic analysis includes additional digital data, fire debris samples, and ballistic comparisons. Results from these analyses may clarify unresolved elements of the timeline. This case stands out within Indianapolis homicide data due to the combination of factors involved. The incident includes multiple victims, a residential fire, surviving children, and an interstate pursuit. Such convergence of elements is statistically less common and increases investigative complexity. The case highlights the intersection of family violence, firearms, and arson. Each component requires a different investigative discipline, and the overlap places significant demands on law enforcement resources. For prosecutors, the primary challenge lies in presenting a clear narrative from fragmented evidence. Without eyewitnesses and with limited interior documentation, the case relies heavily on forensic reconstruction and digital data. More broadly, the case reflects ongoing challenges in domestic homicide investigations, particularly when crimes occur inside private residences and involve family relationships. As of now, the public record establishes the identities of the victims, the charges filed, and the basic sequence of events. Many details remain sealed, including portions of digital evidence, juvenile-related information, and specific forensic findings. At trial, prosecutors are expected to address the shooting sequence, the fire's origin, the suspect's movements, and digital corroboration. Defense challenges will likely focus on intent, timeline gaps, and evidentiary reliability. Accountability will depend on how successfully evidence aligns to support the charges. Given the volume of forensic material, full clarity may take years, particularly if appeals follow conviction. For now, the case remains active, with critical details still under review and legal proceedings ongoing. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.